The child you were is dying inside you, right now. As you sit there scrolling through another self-help video, seeking the magic formula for self-love, that wounded child within is gasping for breath under the weight of your adult expectations. You think healing means moving forward, doesn't it? You think growth means leaving the past behind, cutting ties with who you used to be. But here's what they never told you. What the therapy industry keeps hidden. What every self-love guru conveniently omits. The very foundation of your self-hatred was built when you were 5, 7, 9 years old. Every time you criticize yourself in the mirror, every time you apologize for existing, every time you shrink yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for you, that's not the adult speaking. That's the child who learned that love was conditional, that safety meant silence, that being good meant being invisible. You've been trying to love a stranger. You've been pouring affection into a shell while the real you, the one who still remembers what it felt like to believe in magic, to trust without question, to need without shame, remains locked away, unfed, unseen, slowly starving in the basement of your consciousness. This is the cruel joke of modern healing culture. It teaches you to be your own best friend while you're simultaneously at war with the most vulnerable part of yourself. It tells you to practice self-compassion while you continue to abandon the one who needs it most. It promises transformation while ignoring the root system that feeds every pattern of self-rejection you've ever known. That child, they're not gone. They're not a phase you outgrew or a weakness you overcame. They are the living blueprint of every relationship you'll ever have, including the one with yourself. And until you turn toward them with the reverence they deserve, every act of self-love will be hollow. Every moment of self-acceptance will be temporary. Every attempt at healing will be built on sand. They taught you to be ashamed of need, remember? Remember how quickly you learned that tears were inconvenient, that hunger was demanding, that fear was weakness? The adults around you, wounded themselves, operating from their own unhealed places, couldn't hold space for the raw authenticity of a child's emotional truth. You learned this lesson in 1,000 small moments, when your parents were too tired to listen, when your teachers valued quiet over curiosity, when your caregivers met your pain with dismissal or distraction. You learned that love was something you had to earn, that acceptance was something you had to perform for, that your very existence was a burden requiring constant justification. So you learned the great betrayal. You learned to abandon yourself before anyone else could abandon you. You built walls around that tender part of yourself and called it maturity. You silenced the voice that asked for comfort and called it independence. You numbed the longing for unconditional acceptance and called it resilience. But look at what this has cost you. Look at the exhaustion that lives in your bones from decades of performing for love. Look at how you give to others. From a place of depletion, from a place of proving your worth, from a place of endless offering that expects nothing in return. Because you learned that receiving was selfish, that having needs was inconvenient, that taking up space was greedy. This isn't self-love. This is self-abandonment dressed up in spiritual clothing. This is the wounded child trying to heal everyone else's inner child while neglecting their own. This is the little one inside you recreating the same dynamic over and over. I will be so good, so helpful, so perfect, that finally someone will see me, will choose me, will stay. You give and give and give, hoping that if you're useful enough, selfless enough, accommodating enough, someone will finally offer you the unconditional love you've been starving for. But the person who needs to see you most is you. The person who needs to choose you first is you. The person who needs to stay is you. And you can't love what you've disowned, what you've buried, what you've decided was too much trouble to tend. Your adult self keeps trying to fix the symptoms while ignoring the cause. You work on your boundaries but don't address why you never learn to have them. You practice self-care but don't heal the part of you that believes you don't deserve care. You chase self-confidence while the child inside still believes they're fundamentally flawed, fundamentally too much, fundamentally unlovable. This is why your healing keeps hitting the same walls, why your growth feels temporary, why your self-love feels performative. Because you're trying to build a house on a foundation that was never solid to begin with. The foundation is that child's relationship with themselves, their understanding of their own worth, their basic sense of safety in the world. Carl Jung knew this truth. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But why terrifying? Because accepting yourself completely means accepting the child who was told they were too much, too sensitive, too needy. It means facing the little one inside who still believes they have to earn love through performance, through perfection, through the endless exhaustion of trying to be someone else. This is the shadow work that no one talks about in their polished Instagram posts about self-love. This is the archaeology of the soul, digging through layers of conditioning, through decades of learned helplessness, through the sediment of small betrayals and large abandonments to find the original self, the self who knew how to want without guilt, how to feel without apology, how to exist without justification. Your inner child isn't a metaphor. It's not some abstract psychological concept to be analyzed and filed away. It's not a problem to be solved or a wound to be fixed. It is the living, breathing core of your authentic self, the part of you that holds your creativity, your spontaneity, your capacity for wonder and connection. It's the part of you that knows what you actually want, not what you should want. The part that knows what actually hurts, not what should hurt. When you cut yourself off from this child, you cut yourself off from your own inner compass. You become a person who lives by other people's maps, other people's definitions of success and happiness and love. You become a stranger to your own desires, your own needs, your own truth. You become someone who knows how to function, but has forgotten how to feel. Someone who knows how to survive, but has forgotten how to thrive. The ancient Greeks spoke of the demon, the inner spirit that guides and inspires. The Romans called it genius, the divine spark within each person. Indigenous cultures have always known that we carry the wisdom of our ancestors and the innocence of our origins within us. This is what your inner child represents. Not just the wounded part, but the wise part. Not just the hurt part, but the whole part. But modern psychology has taught us to pathologize this connection. We're told that healthy adults should be independent, rational, self-sufficient. We're taught that needing comfort is weak, that seeking reassurance is codependent, that any attachment to our younger selves is regressive. This is the lie that keeps us fractured, that keeps us performing instead of being, that keeps us healing the symptoms while ignoring the source. The mystics understood something our therapeutic culture has forgotten. Wholeness doesn't come from transcending our humanity, but from embracing it completely. It doesn't come from rising above our needs, but from honoring them. It doesn't come from outgrowing our tenderness, but from protecting it. But what if healing meant something different? What if self-love wasn't about becoming a better person, but about becoming a whole person? What if it meant returning to that child with the tenderness they always deserved, with the patience they never received, with the unconditional acceptance that was their birthright? This is the radical act that no one prepares you for, to parent yourself with the love you needed then. To speak to your inner child not as a project to be fixed, but as a precious being to be cherished. To offer yourself the safety you never had, the comfort you were denied, the permission to be human that no one ever gave you. Picture this. What if you spoke to yourself the way you would speak to a frightened child who came to you for comfort? What if you met your own pain with the same tenderness you would offer to a wounded animal? What if you held space for your own struggles with the same compassion you would show to your dearest friend? This new kind of self-love doesn't overflow from abundance, it creates abundance. It doesn't give from fullness, it fills the emptiness first. It says, "Little one, you are not too much. You never were. Your feelings are not inconvenient. Your needs are not selfish. Your very existence is a gift, not a burden. You don't have to earn your place here. You belong simply because you are." When you heal the relationship with your inner child, something miraculous happens. You stop seeking validation from the outside world because you've given it to yourself. You stop performing for love because you've already received it. You stop shrinking to fit into spaces that were never meant for you because you've learned to take up the space you actually need. This is the self-love that transforms everything. Not the self-love that makes you more palatable to others, but the self-love that makes you more authentic to yourself. Not the self-love that makes you easier to digest, but the self-love that makes you impossible to ignore. Not the self-love that fixes you, but the self-love that reveals you were never broken to begin with. Imagine waking up in the morning and your first thought isn't criticism but curiosity. How are you feeling today, sweetheart? What do you need? How can I take care of you? Imagine making decisions not from fear or obligation, but from a genuine desire to honor both your adult wisdom and your childlike knowing. This is what it means to live from wholeness, to carry both the innocent trust of a child and the seasoned wisdom of an adult. To be both tender and strong, both vulnerable and boundaried, both open and discerning. To love yourself not despite your humanity, but because of it. The sun doesn't apologize for shining. The river doesn't ask permission to flow. Your inner child doesn't need to justify their existence or moderate their needs or perform their worth. They need to be welcomed home, acknowledged, honored, and allowed to inform your choices from a place of authenticity rather than trauma. But even this, healing must know its seasons. Even this tender relationship with your inner child must learn the rhythm of approach and retreat, of holding and releasing. There are times when the work must be put down, when the constant tending becomes another form of obsession, another way to avoid the present moment, another project for the ego to perfect. Your inner child doesn't need to be healed perfectly. They don't need to be analyzed endlessly or processed into submission. They need to be acknowledged, honored, and then allowed to rest. They need to know that you see them, that you're sorry for the ways you've ignored them, and that you're committed to showing up differently. But they also need to know that they're safe enough now to stop fighting, safe enough to stop demanding constant attention, safe enough to trust that you won't disappear again. This is the mature love, knowing when to tend and when to simply be, knowing that healing isn't a destination but a relationship, knowing that your inner child doesn't need to be rescued. They need to be integrated. They need to know they belong in your life, not as a crisis or a problem, but as an essential part of who you are. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop trying to heal and simply exist. Stop analyzing and simply feel. Stop fixing and simply be present with what is. Let the child inside know that they don't have to earn your attention through crisis or pain. They can have your love simply because they exist, simply because they are part of you, simply because they have always been worthy of care. There is a silence that comes after the storm of recognition, after the tears of reunion, after the rage of betrayal has been witnessed and honored. It is the silence of integration, the quiet of deep knowing, the stillness that comes when the war between your adult self and your child self finally ends in peace. In this silence, you discover that you don't need to choose between being mature and being authentic, between being responsible and being spontaneous, between being wise and being innocent. You can be all of these things because you are no longer fractured. You are no longer at war with yourself. You are no longer trying to love a stranger. The abyss you once feared, the bottomless pit of childhood need, the overwhelming vastness of childhood pain, transforms into something else entirely. It becomes the well from which your creativity springs, the source from which your empathy flows, the foundation upon which your authenticity rests. What once felt like a wound becomes a doorway. What once felt like weakness becomes a strength. But this integration requires something that our culture of constant doing cannot understand. The willingness to be still, to be quiet, to let the healing happen without managing it, without directing it, without turning it into another achievement. Your inner child needs to know that they can rest now, that the hypervigilance can end, that they don't have to perform even their healing. So here's what I'm asking of you. Not as another therapeutic exercise, not as another step in your healing journey, but as a moment of genuine recognition, of coming home to yourself after a long exile. Write this in the comments below. Write it as a promise to the child who still lives within you, who still hopes for your return, who still believes in the possibility of being truly seen and loved. Write, I see you, little one. I'm sorry I forgot about you. I'm here now. Don't. Write it because you understand it intellectually. Don't write it because it sounds healing or spiritual or profound. Write it because something in your chest recognized the truth of it, because something in your body shifted when you imagined speaking to that child with tenderness instead of criticism. Write it because that child inside you just took their first full breath in years, because they just felt their shoulders drop from around their ears, because they just remembered what it felt like to be welcomed instead of tolerated. This isn't about becoming someone new. This is about remembering who you were before the world taught you to be someone else. This is about reclaiming the parts of yourself you thought you had to sacrifice to survive. This is about discovering that the love you've been seeking everywhere else has been waiting inside you all along, in the eyes of a child who never stopped believing in your return. But here's what else I want you to understand. This isn't the end of your healing. This is the beginning of your wholeness. This recognition, this reunion with your inner child, it's not another box to check off on your self-improvement list. It's a relationship to be tended, a connection to be honored, a trust to be rebuilt day by day, choice by choice, moment by moment. Your inner child will test you. They will ask you to prove that you meant what you said, that this isn't just another abandonment disguised as care. They will present you with opportunities to choose them over the opinions of others, to choose authenticity over approval, to choose your own needs over the endless demands of a world that never learned to tend its own inner children. And in those moments, when you're tempted to silence that voice again, when you're tempted to shrink back into the familiar patterns of self-abandonment, remember this conversation. Remember the recognition you felt. Remember that choosing your inner child isn't selfish, it's sacred. It's how you stop the cycle of wounding that has been passed down for generations. It's how you become the adult you needed when you were small. The river of healing flows both ways, backward to tend what was wounded, forward to create what's possible. But it starts here in this moment with this simple recognition. The child you were deserves the love you're learning to give. They always did. They were never the problem. The problem was a world that had forgotten how to love its children, starting with the child within themselves. Write those words. Make that promise. And then, if you're ready to go deeper, if you're ready to explore what it really means to live from wholeness instead of woundedness, watch the next video in this series. Because your inner child has been waiting long enough, it's time to come home.